Hello and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. I'm here with Dakota Krout, who's an international best-selling author, and he's also the owner of Mountandale Press. So welcome to the call, Dakota.
Thank you so much for having me, man. This is it's really nice to be here, and I love what you're doing with all this stuff. So thanks for inviting me on the show.
Oh, great. Thanks for that. I really appreciate those words. So with your books, let's start with your books first, because most of your books you write in the LitRPG and the GameLit genres. So tell me a bit about how you got started with those genres, and also for people who are maybe new to this sort of writing, what do those genres mean?
Sure. So I started writing my first book. I want to say early 2016. I published it in late 2016. And I wrote my first book just completely out of love for the idea I was having at the time. And so I have a background in computer science. So I was in the military for a long time. I did a lot of communications work. I went out from there, joined the university program for computer science, and so it just kind of really impacted how I thought about things. And so what I wrote was a book that has kind of a rule system. So it's like epic fantasy with a overlay of kind of video game rules that define the magic system, define most of the other things that are going on in the books. And that was, as it turns out, of a new burgeoning genre. There was 3 or 4 other authors in total at the time in America who were writing in that genre, and so literally it was just starting. And thanks to a really cool book reviewer, Drew Hayes, so he's an author. He was also reviewing books at the time, and he sent a bunch of his fans to me and he told me this later. He said he did it because he was trying to get them to calm down so he could actually write. So he's like, here's a cool book I found, read that. And then he's like, over here typing as fast as he can. And so he sent a bunch of people my way, and so that really picked up. My series picked up. And then the career just kind of took off from there. And so LitRPG and GameLit, so as it turns out, is a solid definition of those genres, is fantasy or science fiction with an overlay of video game rules that are a clear magic system that the user, the reader, can participate in just by kind of reading. It's a genre meant to give you the experience of playing through some really high intensity role-playing games without having to go and spend 300 400 hours playing a game, right? So it is obviously full-on novels, full regular fantasy series, but just with a little bit of extra on there for you to see. Yeah.
So could it be, for example, if in a type of game you collect points or something like that, in the book you'd also be doing that sort of thing as you're reading the book?
Absolutely, yeah. The character is, so it's not like a choose your own adventure or anything. So it is a full novel, right? So that character is doing quests, doing all these other adventures, all these other fun things, just like you would see in a video game, and then leveling up their skills, leveling up their everything that they have, and then increasing their characteristic points, and just growing as a person. So it's fantasy, it's progression, it's usually a weak character to a very strong character by the end of the series, so on and so forth with that.
Oh, brilliant. Are you a bit of a gamer yourself? Is that where you got the inspiration to start writing in these kind of categories?
Oh yeah, so I've always been a huge fan of D&D, and I'm a huge board gamer. Every 5 years or so, I'll pick up a new video game and play it to death a little bit, just when I do have free time, which is fairly rare. But it can be really fun, man, and just kind of seeing the creativity that other people bring to these things really can drive my own creativity. So that's why I make sure to spend some time not just doing one thing, but trying lots of stuff.
Yeah. So with your writing process for a book that is in this sort of genre, do you think it's different to people who are writing a more regular novel, do you think? Or is there other things you have to factor in that which maybe I wouldn't have considered? Yeah.
So the main driving difference between this, so LitRPG and just epic fantasy, because we write big books, we write, hefty stories, really good world building, lore, all of this stuff. I build a full economy of everything, magic, people, all of the stuff that goes into any other epic fantasy. The biggest difference is that although usually it's extremely character driven content, the most important aspect is actually the system, right? So the magical system that you put in place. So if you go into your books, if you go into writing this genre and you say, hey, you can't do this, but you can do this, but then you do this thing anyway because your character is like super special, whatever it is, that's a good way to lose audience quickly, right? Because the laws of the system are meant to be immutable, just like in a video game, right? Like you're not supposed to be able to change what is and is not possible. Like you can push the bounds, you can adjust things, you can make variations on stuff, but to just a hard point of say, I'm just going to break the rules is not supposed to be allowed to happen. And so typically what you'll see in a lot of fantasy or epic fantasy stuff like that is they'll say, well, I can do this because I'm the chosen one. I can do this because I have the king's blood running through me or whatever it is, right? And in this, it's like, no, that doesn't matter as much because this, right? Because the system is the foundation of the books. And so that's kind of the big difference, I would say, between this genre and even really closely related genres such as epic fantasy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever had readers call you out on, like, sometimes when there's been a lapse in that judgment or you've missed the rules?
I've had people call me out on, so in especially in some of my earlier books, I'll show what is going on to like the 100th decimal point. So not like 100 out, but like 0.01. I'll have people correct my math years later. Like they're going through and doing the math, and they'll send me this thing. They're like, "Hey man, you're off by 0.01 in this page in this book," and I was like, "Yo, that was 6 years ago." I can't do anything about it at this point, but thank you. I'll try. I'll try. And so then eventually, what I started doing was I started rounding down to the 10th.
Right.
And
Okay.
so yeah,
Avoid prime
and
numbers at
then
all costs.
oh my gosh, seriously, like it's really cool though because it just shows immense dedication and immense love of the genre by those fans, and so I still love that. And I always call them out and say, "Hey, that's super cool that you pointed stuff like that out to me. It's really nice that you care so much about this book and this series doing super well." So it's a really fantastic fan base.
Great. So with your writing process, do you come up with the idea for maybe the world first and then build the characters around it? Or because with a lot of books, I feel like a lot of writers I speak to, they've kind of got this concept of a story and where it's going to go. But it sounds like for you,
Mhm.
it's like the world is the important part and it's the way that people interact in that world. Is that right, or is that kind of different?
Yeah, so I actually have a whole hour-long lecture I do on this,
Okay.
which is pretty neat. So I'm sure you can find it out there if, for anyone who wants to look it up. It's I call it system first series creation, and you might be able to find it. I don't know. So system first series creation is essentially what I do is I make this system, right? And remember, I come from computer science and
Yeah.
that world, so it's pretty well put together, right? Like it's intended to be put into video games directly, so they can be fairly intricate. So I do the system first, and I say, okay, now that I have this system, right? So this is the concept. This is the magic system. This is how I want things to progress. How am I going to? What sort of power set within these rules will a character need to follow in order to make an interesting story, right? And so I make the system, and then I say, all right, so this character is going to start with this skill set, and it's still going to follow all these rules, but it's going to be cooler just because it has really unique properties, right? And then I say, okay, well, now that I have this character, and here's going to be his progression path through this system that I've already built, what sort of personality are they going to need to use that in an interesting way? So I make system, and then I make power progression, and then I put personality on that. And I say, okay, so in order to get from this power level to this power level with this personality type, what's going to be happening in the background, right? Like what sort of enemies are we going to have because of this to make this to really showcase how unique and cool this can be. And so then I have my enemies that'll show up here. I have my enemies that are going to be the final boss. And so then once I have the system, I have how he progresses through it. I have their personality. I have the enemies. That means I have basically everything I need, and then the story kind of writes itself at that point.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's the really quick and dirty version of it.
So it is kind of
Yeah.
backwards to how a lot of other authors go and approach writing books, I think, because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it sort of
Yep.
turns it all on its head.
And I'm sure you've heard many times where people are like, "Oh yeah, sometimes I'm planning on writing this, and the character just takes over, and they just go off and do their own thing, and I'm just like writing the experience." It's like that's cool, but the reality in that situation is that if you're writing and you're intending to write one thing, and something entirely different comes out, that means that you have a really deep intrinsic knowledge of what that character and their personality type should actually be doing, right? So
Yep.
you say like, "Hey, I'm going to do this, but it comes out different." If you go in and you look at at various personality models, you can really find like, "Hey, people with these types of personalities react in this way when things are going well, or react in this direction when things are going poorly." And you'll find that oftentimes when at that point of deviation in the book, you'll be able to say, "Hey, if I were actually following this personality model, I would see that this is actually the way that they should be reacting." And I knew that because I know these people. Like I know people that would actually react this way. And so subconsciously, you're following the real path of what's going on. But if you can't clearly like codify that, if you can't clearly say this is how this person would do it, then it's really hard to repeat it, right? It's really hard to make a repeatable, scalable system or book series. And that's when people write themselves into corners because
Yeah.
they don't know where to go from there. Mhm.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of the
Fun,
book.
right?
Yeah, really fun. Yeah, it's quite a different concept to me because I've never really been much into video games myself. So I'm trying to
Oh, yeah.
like conceptualize how it
Well,
works. But
that's just psychology, man. Like that's straight out of the books. I that's one of the things is I don't only read what the genre that I write in. Like I'm reading everything. Like right now, this is my go-to book, Outlive the Science and Art of Longevity. So that's a fun one.
eat
But I
spinach,
have
basically.
everything from that to negotiation tactics to theology to psychology. I was reading just a giant book of logical proofs the other day, trying to figure out ways that I can make a more interesting character set.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean that's just one of those things. Is as a career, writing is a difficult one because you need to do an immense amount of continuing education to still remain viable as an author and writing really cool and interesting stories over a long period of time. And you also need to have a lot of interesting experiences so that you can write about cool things. If you stay in a small dark room the whole time, you're going to have a really hard time
Yeah.
coming out with new and interesting stuff. So yeah.
So with your books, all of the worlds that exist are like, invented by you. They're sort of your creations. But
Yeah.
it sounds like a lot
Mhm.
of people could create worlds. Sorry, not create worlds. Write books around games or worlds that already exist using those structures that are already there. Is that something
Yes
people
and
do?
no.
Right.
Yes and no. So there is such a thing as, copyright law, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people originally started trying to do stuff like straight D&D and there were people that were contacted by Wizards of the Coast and that were like, "Hey, you can't do this stuff."
Right.
So there you do typically have to generate new and interesting concepts when you're doing stuff like that, or you need to figure out like if you're trying to use a system directly from something else, you just rip it whole cloth, you're gonna there's like legal consequences to that potentially. So
Right.
it's
Okay.
just one of those things. Yeah,
So people
that's
should be careful, like when they are creating their worlds, that they are really are creating them and not just, taking other
yeah,
people's work. Yeah, fine. That makes sense.
absolutely. I mean, just like any other art form, like you can draw inspiration from places, but if you just do it, that's plagiarism.
Yeah.
And their words, not mine.
A lot of your books, because they're based on those rules that you get with games, have you or any other writers had it taken that one step further and been made into a game or, into
Yeah.
a slightly further extended worlds?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing because yes, that's something that we've all been attempting to do. I've done board games, like I have a board game of one of my books. The actual process of turning something into a video game is a years long process
Hmm.
and disastrously expensive, right? And so I've had times where I've been made offers to have stuff turned into video games, but it's just not good offers, or they kind of just vanish after a short while or whatever it is. And so yeah, I think it's something that will happen eventually, but so even some of the most popular people in the genre don't have the most clearly defined systems, and so there would have to be a lot of work that goes into those in order to turn those into video games. And so right now I'm starting actually talks with a tabletop RPG designer.
Yeah.
And so I'm working to turn one of my series into a tabletop RPG, and then use that as the basis for turning it into like anime, or I'm sorry, into what are they called, graphic novels, which would then hopefully be turned into anime. And then once you have those things, typically it's pretty easy to add in that extra route of making a video game out of it or something else similar.
Oh, interesting. I was speaking
Yeah.
to Kevin Jansen recently, and he's actually creating like tabletop type games or card games using
Oh yeah.
Kickstarter as a launch process for his Dan
Mm-hmm.
Shambles zombie series. He said it was a really
Yeah, that's
interesting
pretty cool.
process because it gives a good chance for fans to get a bit more involved in the series and, also make more money, of course.
Yeah, every revenue stream is cool. That's definitely a neat thing. But I would so since this talk is specifically mostly for authors, correct? Like,
Yeah.
is who's going to be seeing this? Okay, so one other thing I'm going to caution everyone to, and I say this as the owner of a publishing company, and as an author myself, and I do a huge amount of career counseling. I would say I have 3 or 4 sessions a week, right? That I'm talking to people and trying to help them get to where they want to be. If you're finding success in writing, double down on that. Like, don't say, hey, like, I'm starting to do well with writing, now I'm going to go do a podcast, now I'm going to go and do a start designing a video game, or I'm going to go completely off script and join a new genre, or go like hog wild and just, I don't know, like, if you're finding success in this, just realize that you're already one of the very few people that are really that are finding success in writing. And so if you double down on that and build that career, like, do what you know you're good at and get even better at it, do phenomenally, and then other people with skill sets in those arenas will come to you, hopefully, and help you make those revenue streams so that you don't have to learn a whole new career while you're trying to build your career. Right?
Yeah.
It's a really tough thing for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around, but it is a very necessary thing for reaching higher levels in any industry. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's a really good quote by Jimmy Carr, who's a British comedian, but he said, "You can do anything you want, you just can't do everything." And it's really pertinent. It's like, you can do anything you want, but concentrate on what you can do. It's the best way forward.
Hmm.
With
Absolutely.
so you've got, as well as being a book writer, you've also got Mountandale Press, which is
I do.
a publishing house for specifically nice logo on you, nice branding. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
it's a publishing house specifically for people in the lit RPG genre. Why did you start that?
So I started that because I so I've always been self-published, and I love all of the things that go into this. Like, I really enjoy writing books. I love the communications between editors and narrators and artists. I love doing all those things, and I even like making ads
Okay.
and advertising and marketing and doing all this stuff. And so the first year I started doing all this, I said, how can I do this better? And so I threw a ton of time and effort into learning how to market and advertise and find cool artists, and I studied like art, which is really hard for me because I'm partially colorblind, and like just tried to figure out things that were interesting. And before I knew it, I had spent like $30,000-$40,000 on like just learning stuff. And at the time, I was not writing fast enough to justify these huge expenditures of time and investments in just promoting my own books. And so what I did is I reached out to 3 authors and I said, hey, I would love to give you a sweetheart deal so that I can practice publishing and make sure that the things that I'm learning are not only applicable to my own stuff. And so my first original 3 authors got a really sweetheart deal in my company, but they also knew they were going to be used as guinea pigs.
Yeah.
And on the plus side for them, they made out like bandits because it was successful, and their series did phenomenally, and we got to test and mature and optimize our processes, and then that turned into a full-on publishing house for cultivation, LitRPG, and GameLit. So 3 sister genres that are really closely tied together. And that's the only things we publish. Like, we don't go outside of our lane. We stay right in that lane.
Yeah. And so what's the process of working with Mountandale Press? Because obviously you've got to be in those genres, but what are the criteria you look for from either authors you want to take on, or even successful authors who want to come work with you?
Sure. I'm going to say the hard parts first, and then I'm going to say kind of the results of that. First off, it has to be in our genres.
Yeah.
Right. That one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And then when we talk to someone who is wanting to write a new series from scratch, like, as in they don't have any work done on that series, but they want to work with us. So they reach out and they say, "Hey, look, I want to work with you." And I say, "Okay, cool. Well, first off, we take on one person per quarter if we have space, right? So we try to stick at about 15 frequently publishing authors, right? So at least twice a year. And at maximum, we'll go to 20 authors if some of our authors are going to be having longer leg times. But at maximum, we'll have 20 active authors in our company at any given time. Just because we're boutique, and we want to make sure that everyone in our company is getting the best possible experience and the best possible, like, attention, marketing, all this other stuff. So if they come to us, then we say, okay, here's what we're going to need. We're going to need to see the system that you're going to use for your books, like your magic system, all that stuff. We want to see that is fleshed out. I want to see outlines for the first 3 books, and I want a 10,000 word sample that I can give to my acquisition editor. And he's going to look at all, he, she, whoever they all are at the time, are going to look at all the different things that are sent in. And if we like what we see, then we'll offer feedback on that. Like, and so we'll say, "Hey, look, here, that's great. Here's ways that you could improve. Here's things that, like, you could do with all this." And at that point, we still do not offer them a contract, right? We say, "All right, so with these recommendations, come back to us with the first book written within 6 months." So 6 months is the upper limit, and the faster that they can do it, obviously, the better for them, the better for everything, right? And so if they come back to us in the first 6 months, and they say, "Look, I using this," then we'll take a look at the book, compare it to the outline that they sold to us, like the sold us on, I should say. And if it if it matches up well, obviously there's going to be deviation, but whatever. But if it matches up well, and, like, the story that we saw is the one we liked, and written out is the one we liked, then we'll have another conversation and kind of do a vibe check. Sometimes I'll, like, fly over to wherever they are and meet with them, have dinner. And if we can't, otherwise, just meet in person in another easier way. And if we pass that vibe check, then we offer them a contract, right? And so in our contracts, before we'll publish that first book, we need 3 books total, right? So in one series. And so once we have those 3 books, then we will start publishing them, right?
Yeah.
It's like 1.25% of the people that originally apply to us actually make it through that process.
Okay.
It's
quite strict.
It's not. Well, here's the thing: is it most people fall off because they don't really want to do that amount of work, right? So,
Yeah.
so you do that. You, like, here's a submission, and then you have 6 months to write a book. Well, like, we lose 80% of people right there, because they either come in and say, "Look, I don't want to do that. That's too tight of a deadline for me." Okay, well, that's my genre, right? Like, it's 6 months. Like, 4 books a year is considered average, like, for my genre. So 4 books at about 115,000 words pop.
Right.
And so that's just the thing, is we have a huge production requirements. Otherwise, they come in, they say, "Look, I figured out how to do all this. I learned, like, I found that I can write these books on my own, and so I'm going to take these and do them myself." That's fine. Other people will get through that and they'll say, "Wow, this was a really involved process, and this is the starting step. I can't imagine what all of the actual work looks like." And those are the people that get a chance to do the vibe check. Then basically the reason for this is, when we work with someone, we're investing in the person, not the series, right? I really want to work with someone who wants longevity with my company, and who I want to work with for years and years at a time. And that's kind of the thing, is I want to work with people for a really long time. Now, so that's the hard part. Now let me tell you the cool part about this. kind of the stats of my company. We have of currently 12 authors. That's what we have currently, because it fluctuates a little bit. And what I mean by that is people that are currently writing series, right? Or I'm sorry, that have currently published with us, not the people that are currently writing series and not yet published. Of the people that write with us, like 85% are six figures plus take home per year,
Right.
right? Three of them, and almost four of them, just shy. Three of them are seven figure take home authors, right? And so that's the thing, is we have a track record of phenomenal success with the people that work with us, because we give fantastic royalty rates. We have a really great community. We're open to a lot of discussion. We have standardized operating procedures for how we make things happen. And so there are no surprises for our authors once they're in, right? They can see exactly what's coming. They know exactly what is going to be happening next. And so they can put their book out with us, and I can't say guarantee, because no one can guarantee anything, but they have compared to the industry at large, a phenomenal chance of high earning potential.
Yeah.
And so that's why we remain boutique and just kind of a small house, is because we don't need hundreds and hundreds of authors. We want to elevate our authors as much as we can individually.
Right.
So
That's
that's what our company looks like.
that's amazing success rates to have that many people doing that much, turnover and take home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. With if a lot of people who'll be listening to this maybe haven't done your exact genre yet, but may have done something adjacent, so they might be writing fantasy, for example, and they think, okay, this genre sounds interesting. I like the idea of building these magic worlds. What are the sorts of things they need to do differently to their normal writing in order to have a great application with you?
Sure. So first, I would say read the genre. So
Yeah.
if you want to write in the genre, make sure to read the genre, do a lot of research on it. See, because the thing is, if you don't actually like the genre, you probably shouldn't write in it, right? That's why there's a lot of genres I don't write in.
Yeah.
Horror, for example. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a horror fan, because I write clean, lighthearted, fun, like dad joke pun fantasy, right? I don't like the whole creeping existential dread. Like it sticks in my head too long. I don't like it. But so that's the thing. Like I don't write that because I don't want to. So it's it's really easy for people in the genre to tell when someone is writing the genre because they want to write the genre, or just writing the genre because they think they can pull one over on the community. Yeah, if you don't kind of understand what you're doing, it's like the tropes, all this other stuff. So that's the starting point. So just read it, make sure you like it. Secondly, just kind of make sure that you're very detail oriented, because if you come in and you try to do a character driven only story in lit RPG, it's going to have less of a success rate than you are thinking, like, because other genres are very forgiving sometimes. This one is much closer to how like military sci-fi presents itself, with pretty strict and harsh requirements for hitting tropes. So it's just one of those things. Gotta figure those out.
Right. Okay. And you talked at the beginning about building out your magic system and making sure that's
Mhm.
really clear. What would a clear magic system look like? Do you have any examples of ones maybe you've done that could help the audience?
Yeah. So I have upper and lower bounds on each different tier of magic, right? So what I mean by that is I have like tier 1 to tier 10. Well, it's tier 0 to tier 9 really, but 1 to 10. And so essentially what I do is I say, if a magic is within this realm over here, it has these uses. Like, so what I like to say is a tier 1 spell is anything at touch range, right? So if I'm going to use the spell, I had to touch them with it in order to make it happen, right?
Hmm.
And so then there's 10 levels within that build up that spell. So it's at level 1 tier, like level 1 tier 0, which is the first tier, but yeah. So it looked like 0 1 in terms of skill level. I can light my hand on fire and smack someone with it.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward, right? Or I can grab them and burn into them, right? So that,
Yeah.
like, right. So once I maximize that to level 10, it switches over to tier 1, or so it's 1, so then it would look like skill level 11, right?
Right.
So it's tier 1 level 1, or tier 1 level 0, because then it goes up. And now in this one, I can throw this, or I can use it at range. So now instead of like a hand that's on fire, it turns into a fireball that I can throw.
Right.
Pretty
Okay.
straightforward, right?
Yep.
And so just having like kind of like that, and then it goes up all the way up until I can like light the world within a certain distance around me just on fire, right?
Yep.
To at the maximum thing. And so yeah, so that's just kind of thing is knowing what progression looks like throughout every part of that journey, even if you're not going to actually reach that in your books, because then you can at least show characters who have reached that pinnacle of power and you know what it should look like. And you don't say, oh man, I have no way to fight these godlike creatures because I never figured out what the actual bounds of power in that are supposed to be.
Right.
So yeah, so really clearly defining how things work, no matter what the spell is kind of what I would say is one of the most useful things to do.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So just make it just as clear as possible and how each of the different magics interact with each other as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. The success of your particular authors was quite remarkable. You said like however many over 85% were over 100,000 a year.
Mhm.
Do you the way that you market your books? Do you have specific fans of Mountandale Press and all of the authors that come with it, or is there any other specific marketing that you do for this kind of genre?
Oh yeah. I mean, so if you think about marketing or advertising, anything else, I mean it's the same here, right? So I see those as very separate things because marketing is how we reach and maintain relationships with our fans, and advertising is how we reach new fans through like paid marketing, paid advertising, right? So we
Yeah.
make ads, do this stuff, try and bring them in. We do have fans that are specific to Mountaindale, which is really cool, where they just come in and they're like, "Look, if Mountaindale's putting it out, I'm reading it
Yep.
because I know what the standards for Mountaindale are." And so they're like, "I know I can read this and it's not gonna my wife won't see it and be shocked. My children, if they get the book, I don't have to snatch it away from them. That sort of thing, right?" And so they know what they're getting when they come in and work with us. Just fun, awesome books, escapism, like good quality stuff. And yeah, but otherwise, yeah, we do marketing everywhere, man. Like name a social media platform and we have ads there. So it's even TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah. For people who are just wanting to start in this niche, what, or maybe they have written this niche but haven't come to yet, what are the marketing strategies you think that are the best ones to start with?
So I the first thing I would recommend is joining LitRPG GameLit communities online. So
Yeah.
find them on Facebook, Reddit, wherever they exist. Join them and just be a part of that community for a while. Like engage with people, comment on posts, read books when people put them up, because a lot of my genre is extremely relationship based, right? So we meet up at different conventions over like during the year. So if you go to Dragon Con, there's a massive lit RPG presence to the point where they've given us like 15 different panels in different tracks now because it's gotten so large there. And yeah, I mean, just going and being a part of things will kind of give you a feel for not only the authors but the readers because everyone is very involved with each other. And if you build up that relationship ahead of time before you're trying to sell to them, you're going to have a better understanding of how you should speak to them when you do go in with advertisements or
Yeah.
advertisements or marketing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Can you see any changes with the industry at the moment in terms
Oh,
of new trends, for example, like genres that you think are coming in? What's kind of hot?
so constantly. So here's the interesting thing is that it does change fairly quickly because someone will put something out that does really well and then immediately there's going to be a lot of people that have variants of that, right? And there's people that write very fast in this genre. And so my recommendation is always if you're writing what you think is going to be the hot new thing, keep your mouth shut until you publish it. and then put it out, right? And then talk about it everywhere. But currently one of the things that was really hot is like deck builders. So, and that was, I mean, that was all the rage in this last year, and so I think it's kind of coming to a close. But you know, it went from pretty standard like RPG style to there was a brief moment of like first person shooter lit RPGs, and chef lit RPGs, like doing cooking magic, stuff like that. And then I went to like deck builders where like you fight monsters and they turn into cards, and then you can like use those cards for cool things, and so on and so forth. So it's the cool thing is I like to say that lit RPG is the cranberry juice of writing, because it goes with everything, right? Like you got apple juice over there, have a little bit of cranberry juice, and you got cran apple. Hey, orange juice, cran orange. Yeah, perfect. So it can go with anything, and it like if you give me an example, like even if we were talking about like romance, real world romance, right? I could say, hey, the system that you use here is the legal system, right? Because it's like, hey, all these other things going on, and like here is the actual system in place in reality that you can use in order to like work through this romance or whatever else to make sure that you come out with a good ending, right? And that's, I mean, a whole thing. So yeah, I mean, it can go with any genre, which is really neat. Even
Yeah.
horror, which Matt Dinman has been showing with Dungeon Crawler Carl. So yep,
Okay.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
So I think maybe with this genre, I mean, all genres, it's important to do that networking within the community, and that's, we've talked about it so much on these podcasts, but it sounds like with the lit RPG and GameLit specifically, you really do need to be on the forums, like chatting to people, building up that network, so that you can understand what's going on in the industry and understand those trends.
I kind of missed the actual question there. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'll start the question again. We talk about a lot on this podcast about the importance of having that author network and speaking to people within your industry, like you just mentioned on Reddit, joining forums. But it sounds like it's specifically important for this industry, like GameLit and Lit RPG, because you need to be
Yes.
on top of those trends and what's happening.
Yes. So the trends are really important, and again, just maintaining positive relationships. One of the cool things about about LitRPG is that we communicate really heavily in between even the publishing houses, right? So like I'm really good friends with all the other publishing houses like that are major players currently. Like some new ones have kind of popped up, and so I might not know them as well, but I know a ton of authors, and I try to be helpful and someone who is giving good information no matter what. Like especially when I'm meeting someone for the first time, I always try to be like super nice, listen to what they have to say, try and I always want to make a good impression and keep it up with my actions over time, because you never know when someone is going to come out of nowhere and just be like, hey, like this guy over here was super nice to me, and so like I'm going to go out there and just do cool things and say positive stuff about them too. And so that's kind of what it is. This is like a mutual admiration society where we all just say really nice things about each other and build each other up as high as we can. And it's a great place to be if you are really into what we do, because everyone
Yeah.
here just loves it. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that collegiate atmosphere. That sounds really fun. Now, have you got any upcoming projects that you want to talk about, either with your books or specifically with Mountandale Press? Any exciting things that are happening?
Sure. So I always have exciting projects coming out. Because I write really fast. I have a new series that's going to be coming out next year that is, I'm actually kind of keeping a little close to the chest for now. But I'll talk about another one that I have coming out next year. It's going to be called Chance Encounter, which is actually a romance term, which is really funny. But that's the character's name is Chance Encounter. You're like, hey, you haven't
All
survived
right.
this. Chance Encounter, right? And so that one's going to be on mountaindopress.store. I'm going to actually self-publish that one only on my website. I'm going to keep the whole 6-book series there for a year before porting it out to any other websites, and then any other distribution, I should say. But otherwise, I have 57ish, 58 books out on the market right now. So if you're looking for something to read, I literally have a book titled Something. So it's something, anything, and believe it or not, I can and did do everything, right? So, but I will warn you, if you read something by Dakota Krout, soon you'll be reading anything by Dakota Krout, and then you'll read everything by Dakota Krout.
Is that your
So
tagline?
yeah. So I designed that series for easy marketing.
Yeah.
Right.
Really good. So
Um,
if someone wants to read your books, that's kind of the best place to start, is something or
yeah.
to everything.
Start with
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
It's a good place to
Nice.
start. Yeah.
That's a good place to start.
Otherwise, I don't
Brilliant. Well,
know when is this. Oh, I'm sorry. When is this stream going to go out to people?
probably in about a month or so.
Okay, so yeah, I have a Kickstarter that will be over by then. So otherwise, I would talk about that too.
Okay.
All right, no
um,
worries.
cool. Yeah. Well, brilliant. It's been really great speaking to you. Thank you so much for spending some time chatting to me. I think, I didn't know anything about this topic, so it's great to actually, learn about a new genre, which I didn't know anything about. So that's really good.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I really appreciate it. And it's really cool. Like we've built this up in the last 8 years from 4 or 5 authors to hundreds of authors now. Last year we got a BISAC code, so we got a actual library category code, which then gave us an official category to like home on Amazon, Audible, and all these other places because they mirror what the library system has.
Yeah.
So in under a decade, we went from zero to recognized by library systems and Amazon as a whole. So that was really
Amazing.
cool.
Yeah, really cool. So it's so interesting to see these new genres come out, like, out of seemingly nothing. It's amazing.
Right.
If people want to
Yeah.
get in touch with you, where's the best place to do that?
So you can go to mountandalepress.store, and that's a great place. There's contact information there whoever you want to talk to. Otherwise, Facebook is always great. I have a large community over there. You can go to Mountandale Press Facebook page, or you can go to the Dakota Krout Facebook page. Both are awesome. I have my personal favorite is just the shine the spotlight on Dakota, but I do love bringing everyone to Mountandale because I love building up all of my authors in my company. And that's one of the cool things about having this community is that we can all work extremely well, closely knit together to keep people within our sphere, which is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Facebook, Discord, if you go to search Mountandale Press, that's where I am. Yeah, everything. I mean, anywhere you want to find me, just look for Mountandale or Dakota Krout.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. One last question is, what is the book you recommend that everyone should be reading at the moment?
The book that everyone should read. So I'm actually going to point this outside of what my whole genre is. I'm going to go and say that if you're going to read one book and digest that information, look at How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
So it is a spectacular book. And if you take the principles from that, not only are you going to be able to be a better person, which is always a nice thing, you're going to be able to write characters that have more human interactions with each other. You're going to be able to take those principles and apply them to marketing and to advertising and to just having a community online, right? And so I would say that book is the number one read I would recommend for anyone who wants to do this as a career or have any career at all. So,
yeah, definitely. It's a great book. It's a classic, isn't it? So yeah, really recommend everyone read that one. Well, thank you so much, Dakota. It's been great. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person when we go to Author Nation. But apart from that, yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and I really appreciate being here.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1. Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon,
then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.